Today, I'm sitting down with Rob Huizinga to discuss the important moment in your drug development journey when you meet with investors. A lot of work goes into this meeting, and Rob has some great tips for investor preparation. So Rob, do you mind telling me a little about yourself?
Sure. I'm the Executive Vice President of Corporate Development for Aurinia Pharmaceuticals. I joined Aurinia when this molecule was discovered and helped shepherd it through preclinical, clinical stages right through our successful phase 3 program, which we announced recently. Along the way, I started off as a clinician practitioner in nephrology as an academic, and then moved into the company that's now called Aurinia. I have a master's in medicine and epidemiology and a PhD in organizational leadership. And I chose that educational pathway in the hopes that it would help with my career with Aurinia, which it has.
Great. Now let's discuss your experience with investors. Can you describe your journey with Aurinia when you were trying to find investors?
Sure. I've been involved in investor conversations for a large number of years, and that included just after the crash of the markets in 2008, 9, 10, when we were trying to find money. And at that time, finding investors to invest in a Canadian company, and to put it in context, the Canadian investment landscape is primarily resource-driven. So finding investors to invest in a Canadian company on a story was unbelievably difficult. And we would knock on a lot of doors and have a lot of calls and meet with a lot of investment groups, really not having a lot of success in finding financing. And it wasn't until we joined the original company called Isotechnica and the privately held Aurinia together that we were able to find some success in fundraising over the last 6 or 7 years. But it involved a lot of persistence and involved putting together a very simple story that investors can understand. And by that I mean that investors get to hear hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pitches on potentially valuable molecules throughout their year. And you have to find a way for your story to resonate with them and for it to stick with them so that when you leave the office and another group comes in, your story isn't lost in the noise of all the potential great drugs that are out there. So I learned that you need to have a very clear, consistent story, and a story that you can tell in 30 seconds or 3 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, depending on the amount of time that you have, because your time is very limited. So you get very good at becoming very succinct with your story.
And what are some of the key points you want to touch upon in that elevator pitch? What should that story consist of?
I think investors want to know why your drug is important, the potential market that it can be used in, the size of that potential market, and near-term inflection points. And by that, I mean, if they invest in your company today, what are opportunities for them to maximize their return? Are you having results of a trial reading out next year, or are you having more animal data coming out, or are you expecting some response from a regulator, be it the FDA or the EMA or other regulatory authorities? Those things have to be contained in that elevator pitch, because investors want to know that they have the ability to invest in something that's worthwhile, but also in something that has the potential of a return for their investment team.
I think those are some really important points. Next, how do you begin to build your presentation and prepare for that big meeting? Do you have any special pointers you had found helpful?
Every slide needs to have a so what on it. And you don't actually use those words, but you need to have, what's the point? We're all excited by our science. We're all excited by our molecules. We're all excited by the intricacies of the molecules. The investors really need to know, that's great, but so what? And it's important for the executive of the company to translate that science into a message that's easily understandable and digestible, and that a message that will stick with investors. So I would really encourage people to have that on every single slide. Every slide needs to have a take-home message. And if you think about it, they're going to keep your slide deck when you walk away, and they're going to review it on Thursday or 2 weeks from now on a Tuesday when you're thinking about things, and they won't have you speaking to the deck. So they won't have the same level of understanding with that slide deck after you leave as they have while you're there. And so having that very clear, crisp messaging throughout is very, very, very important. I think the other thing that's important to talk about but not have on your slide is your experience, and that experience could include things that have not worked out so well. In other words, if all you have is success, it could be because you're really good, but it also could be because you've just been extremely lucky. And some of the good things that happen along the way with failures, that you learn from your failures and you get to build from your failures and get to expand your knowledge base because of them. I would never put this on a slide, but certainly I would talk to investors. We tried this path of analysis and it didn't work out, and here's why it didn't work out. And we've learned from that, and we're not going to do that a second time. That also gives investors a real sense of confidence that you're constantly internally criticizing your program and trying to find weaknesses so that it protects their investment in your organization.
Excellent ideas. Those are definitely things to keep in mind. So what advice would you give your past self when you were preparing for your investor meeting?
Well, initially, I thought they would be very excited by the science. And I thought that if I could just give them enough beauty of the science, that would help the investors understand why they want to invest in the company. And that's partially true. But I forgot that they need to hear where the company is going strategically. And again, how will we protect their investment, and how will we do the best job for them so they can have a positive return? After all, the investors are investing in us with the hopes that we can have a positive return for them. And they want to understand both the science and investment thesis. So I wish I had known that second half of the story earlier on, because I certainly would have changed my elevator pitch. I certainly would have changed how my slides looked, because my slides are very complicated and very science-based, and that made a lot of difference. And a really good mentor of mine, Richard Glickman, was just brilliant in teaching me how to drill down a very clear and succinct story for investors.
Interesting. So balancing the science and the investment story was most important to you. That's great. I also wanted to know, what are some examples of questions that you were asked by potential investors?
When you go into meetings with investors, you have to be prepared to defend your story. They're going to read things in advance of your presentation, and they're going to look for the holes in your story. That's their job. And so firstly, you can't be offended when they don't necessarily buy your story. And you have to be prepared in advance positively to find the weaknesses in your story and build defense strategies around them, either through your clinical or preclinical program, or acknowledging their point and having a very clear counterpoint to their message. And sometimes the investors, in their rush of trying to prepare for the meetings, will actually accumulate incorrect data. And so you also have to be willing to say, I heard what you said, but that data point is actually not true. What that data really says is this, and then you correct them on that data stream. Again, doing that in a really positive manner, not in a very aggressive manner. Investors are under a lot of pressure seeing a lot of companies, and it's your responsibility to help them understand the story, not their responsibility. And so you have to take that real humble approach, saying, I'm here to help you understand the story, be very positive, be very firm, and to expect them not to believe it and to find weaknesses. That's a normal half-hour, hour-long meeting, whatever you have with the investors. And they'll bring along a lot of very high-powered, very scientific help in that endeavor to try to find the holes, because that helps them build their investment thesis. So preparation for that meeting and understanding the holes in your own story is critical to success. I think what I knew in my head, but probably didn't practice enough along the way, is that you have to view all of these events as partnership events, right? For a biotech company, you have a number of partners that come alongside you. You have the investors who partner with you financially. You have the investigators and patients who partner with you clinically. You have the CROs and the central labs who partner with you on operations. You have to view them as partners and treat them like that. And I think when you view them as that, it changes the tone of your message, it changes the tone of your slides, but even changes your approach and how you want to partner with them. And you may find that some investors, the way they choose to invest is not worth it to you. In other words, there are some investors that want to invest and get out within a year. And you need to understand what their investment strategy is. And if that doesn't work for your organization, you shouldn't let them invest in your organization. You should find money elsewhere. And if you need investors that typically have a long cycle, let's say 2 years, if that's more important to your organization, you should find those guys and take their money. Because there is a real mistake in not understanding the investor's investment thesis and getting money from the wrong sources. Sure, you have the money, but may you find yourself on the wrong side of that coin very, very quickly, and it may actually lead your company to serious trouble.
Yeah, really considering you're not only finding an investor, but thinking of them as a partner does provide a new perspective. Now, when you're in the investor meeting, how do you talk about your competitors?
One of my favorite phrases is a rising tide lifts all boats. And that means that if your competitors have success, that's not the end of the world, because that actually may help you along the way. So when we talk about our competitors to the investors, we are always positive. We're very clear as to where we think they fit into the market, what kind of market share they might take if their data is positive, and what we think the practicality of their approach is. So, for example, a competitor company may have a great molecule. And I think if they say, yeah, this is a great pathway and it has real scientific potential, I'm not sure that their clinical strategy sort of matches with that. And so we'll just have to wait and see how their data pans out. Or you may say that molecule, that Aurinia has been tried before. It hasn't worked with other companies, but these guys have a very good clinical approach, and we'll follow that company and see what happens. I don't think it does you any favors to not appreciate what those competitors are in the market and to try to disparage them in front of investors. At the end of the day, while we have found success in lupus nephritis, the reality is that over time, other companies will find success in lupus nephritis. That's to be expected. So we just have to keep an eye on them and follow their development program. And so when we talk to investors, have a very fair and accurate assessment of them, but not to disparage them.
I agree 100%. Let's change topics and talk about CROs. What is most important to you when working with a CRO?
Well, it goes back to one of the things I talked about earlier, and that's this whole idea of partnership. So CROs, for example, know things that we as executives don't know. And so you really have to find a CRO that you can partner with well, that understands your therapeutic area and understands the dynamics around your therapeutic area, because there's just so many things you don't know. We assume because our drug is fantastic that every investigator is going to want to put every single patient on it, and it's going to be the fastest enrolling trial in the history of our disease. And that's never true. What we have to do is we have to find good partners. And when CEOs think of CROs, EDC partners, central labs as vendors and not partners, you're going to start the race to the bottom. So you're going to look for the cheapest vendor. You're going to cut corners along the way to get to what you think will be success. And a lot of drugs fail because the company, in its rush forward, doesn't really consider those kind of variables. And I think that's important for executives to know that it's not only about the financing, but it's also your opportunity to find the right CRO that you can partner with that's going to help you move the molecule forward. And they'll bring their expertise of operations and geographic areas and regulatory issues. They will bring that all to the forefront. And that's what you need to look for.
So true. And Aurinia has worked with Worldwide. Do you mind describing your partnership with Worldwide?
I think you hit on the right word, though. It was a partnership. Biotech companies are not the easiest entity to work with. They're full of extremely highly driven individuals with an unbelievable depth of expertise in their therapeutic area. A real successful drug development strategy really requires partnership. And I would say that Worldwide has been a very good partner for Aurinia on a therapeutic area that has been full of failures. Together, we've managed to find a success.
And would you describe the relationship as strategic, transactional, or a mixture of both?
Relationship is a mixture of both. There are aspects of it that are purely transactional, but there were aspects of it that were very strategic as well too. For example, country mix or resource allocation or very strategic recruiting instruments.
Okay, awesome. And what did you like most about working with Worldwide?
The ability to disagree constructively to find a solution. That concept is really important. When companies enter a relationship with a CRO, they think it's all going to run fantastic and that there will be no issues. There are issues and problems with every single clinical trial, and some of these issues and problems can break a clinical trial and can stop a drug development. What you critically need is a partner that you can disagree with constructively in order to find a consensus and a solution. And I think Worldwide has done that very well with us. We have disagreed along the way, but we've disagreed constructively and we've found positive solutions.
Well, that concludes our discussion for today. I want to thank you for joining me on our Uncommon Conversations podcast.